Well, just when you thought, and probably because I told you, that it was hard to win a championship in junior hockey because of that cycle, this week on the OHL podcast, we get to meet a guy that has won not one junior hockey championship, but three, as Mark Mateer joins the podcast. Hey, Mark, it's great to get your time. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, no problem, Mike. I appreciate it.
Before we talk about those championships and your career, uh, I wondered if you might put your color commentator's hat on for a moment, or helmet. We're talking hockey here, and maybe look at this Ottawa 67s team that has started this season like a buzzsaw, 18-1, and give us your analysis as to why Ottawa is so good and why it's because of Jack Mateer.
Well, I think they got off to a really good start for a couple different reasons, and I think the one would have to be the leadership group. So you look at guys like Cam Tolnai, Jack Beck, my son Jack, that were very fortunate their first year to be involved with guys like Noel Hoffenmeyer, Kevin Ball, Austin Keating, Andre Chernier was the head coach. So I think I really think the roots were set back then, a couple of years ago, as far as their being able to look at their leadership crew and bringing that forward into the next couple of years. And now with COVID and everything, obviously that's affected a lot of hockey teams, especially at the junior level. I think one of the reasons why they've had so much success as well is Dave Cameron, the coach. I think it starts at the top. He makes them accountable. There are absolutely no egos on that team. And I think everyone, I know it sounds cliche, everyone has bought into his system and everyone understands their specific role on that team. And I think that is why they are off to this unbelievable 18-2 start, which no one saw coming. It's absolutely remarkable when you look at it, because I look at their roster and no one really, no one really jumps out. Yeah, you got Jack Beck, but he's been hurt most of the year. My son Jack Mateer has obviously made huge strides and is contributing offensively, which I don't think a lot of people realized his capabilities as far as offense. He's kind of more known or labeled as defensive. And then you've got Cam Tolnai, who's come out of the gates hot. And then you can't forget these second year players that have taken steps. And I think that's the key to junior hockey. I think you need three things. I think you need goaltending, which we certainly have got. I think you need to have an unbelievable power play, which, looking at the stats, maybe not last night, but the power play is certainly humming along pretty good. And I think you need leadership, as well as your second year players are so important. They have to make steps. They have to progress. And that starts in the summertime. And talking to Jack, he was very happy with everyone that came back to training camp. And I think Dave Cameron and Norm Milley and Coach Marty would all say the same thing. I think every single one of them came back prepared. And I think that makes a huge difference coming out of the gates early in junior hockey.
How hard is it being a hockey dad at this level? Does it get easier as your son progresses through the game, or does it get harder as the stakes get higher?
Well, that's a really good question, because I get asked that a lot. I would much rather be playing the game than watching the game. I really, really enjoy watching Jack, and I loved watching my oldest boy Tanner play as well. But it is difficult at times. It was certainly more difficult in his first year, just because of the situation he was in. You don't want him to make mistakes because they're first year players. They're playing with veterans, but you don't want them to make any glaring mistakes that would affect the entire outcome of the game. So I think as he has got older, it's gotten a little bit easier. But like you say with your question, I think with more ice time that Jack has, I think it's it's not as easy, but it's a little easier because I can see he's playing with a lot of confidence, and the entire team is certainly playing with a lot of confidence and are on a high right now.
You were drafted into the National Hockey League in the 7th round by Washington. Jack goes in the 4th round to Nashville, and as of last year, he is signed to the Predators organization. Does that make Jack the best hockey player in the Mateer family?
Yes, without a Mike, without a doubt. And I get asked that a lot too. Are there any similarities? What are some of the similarities? I do see some similarities in the way that I played the game and the way that he plays the game, but no, there's no comparison. Jack is 10 times the player I ever was. So, and I'm just a proud father, and I think he's worked so hard to get to the level that he is at currently, and I look forward to obviously what the future holds for Jack.
I get really excited. So forgive me for spending so much time on Jack as we start this, but I
No,
love watching players that I watched growing up see like their kids come through the league now is an absolute thrill for me. I think it's so cool.
well, you know what? It is. And, we're at the age where, you got Jeff Toms in town here, Connor playing for the Greyhounds. I've got Gary Roach's boy being drafted to the Greyhounds. So a lot of my teammates that I played for with the Hounds have had their sons come through the program, whether it be minor hockey here in town or the junior level. So it really is. We've come full circle, and it's nice to sit down and talk stories with all the kids when we get together. So it's a great experience for all of us.
So I started this podcast by making reference to how difficult it is, and I still believe it is, except you made it look pretty easy when it comes to championships. 3 years in the OHL, all with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, 2 OHL championships and a Memorial Cup. I mean, do you ever think back on it and say how like
Yeah.
crazy that is? Like that's banana land.
Yeah, we do. We look back and the one thing I say is we should have won in Seattle. I get upset. I still, I was the last man back with 14.6 seconds, and it's still, I still think about it often. That was our best team in the 3 years, I think. I've told many people that I think overall that was our best, most well-rounded team, and just to have it slip through our fingers and be so close. I could be sitting here saying I won one OHL championship and 2 Memorial Cups, but I was certainly lucky. I came in at a time where they completely overhauled the Greyhounds because they didn't have much success. But what they left behind was a really good core. We had Bob Bugner, Adam Foote, and Brad Tiley on the back end, which is, I don't know if you'd find any better three defensemen at that time on one team. So that was the foundation. And then we had a couple surprises. Kevin Hodson came into town, and he took the crease and he ran with it for 3 years. It was unbelievable. He was probably the most underrated goalie that I've ever played with, and just a tremendous teammate. But we had our leadership. To this day, I still think the most underrated forward in the league was Colin Miller, who, year after year just seemed to put up points, and everyone said, well, his skating isn't good enough, but he seemed to outplay a lot of number one centerman in the league during our playoffs, and he was one of the reasons why we went to the Memorial Cup in Seattle. And after winning the Memorial Cup the following year, it was those guys that we we thought about a lot throughout our playoff run, because they really did lay the foundation. And you guys like Tony Yob, Jason Denemy, Chris Simon, these guys, unfortunately, Colin Miller didn't get the opportunity to raise the cup, but they certainly were a huge part of it.
Deno, as an example, is a guy that came a year prior as part of that Lindros deal, right? Or came to the team as part of the Lindros deal. So it must have been, and you had to go through that Oshawa team the year prior in 91.
Yeah, I actually remember that was my rookie year in the OHL. And I remember, and this might be crazy to hear, but I remember the playoffs were such a grind, and it was such a long time. And you get to the point, as a 17-year-old, 16, 17-year-old, depending how how old you are at that particular time, you get a little homesick and you want to go home and see family. And we just kept winning. And I kept thinking to myself, this is unbelievable. Like, we are not even supposed to be in the same arena as Oshawa. And here we are, um, basically beating them at their own game. And honestly, without Colin Miller and without Joe Basillo and Tony Yob, those three in particular, and Deno had a couple big goals in that series. Um, you know, without them, we don't win. We can't compete at that level. And obviously on the back end, the three horses that Tiley, Foot, and Bugner. Without them, we don't win. I remember Teddy Nolan. This is a funny story. I remember Teddy Nolan pulling myself and Drew Bannister aside before the series started, and we were doing some video, and he said, "Do you see that number 88?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course. He's probably the best player at this age on the planet right now." He says, "Whenever he's on the ice, you two skate off as fast as you can." So, because he was just physically, he was a man, and we're these young defensemen in the league that just breaking through. But yeah, he always wanted to have that matchup. It was Sean Imber and Adam Foote, who did a really good job that series as well. So it was good times here in Sault Ste. Marie. The fans, even to this day, the fans still talk about Eric Lindros coming to town, and they had a fantastic team. I ended up years after I played with Dale Craigwell overseas, and he was a phenomenal player, and what a great guy. But we had some conversations about that series for sure.
When you talk about that homesick feeling, it makes me think back on you being about as Southern Ontario a boy as you could have been, right? St. Catharines is home, and you
Yeah,
get drafted up to the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. What
yeah.
did you know of Sault Ste. Marie at the time, other than that it was way north?
Yeah, that's about it. We knew it was way north, and I've told this story to a lot of people here in Sault Ste. We really didn't know. We knew Sudbury was up north, and then we knew Sault Ste. Marie was kind of in the vicinity. And after the OHL draft, we drove home. My mother was crying a little bit, and we got the map out on the living room floor, and we couldn't find Sault Ste. Marie. And then all of a sudden, my dad said, "Hold on." And there was another piece to the map that had folded underneath. And that last flap that he opened up, and sure enough, there's Sault Ste. Marie. It was about 2.5 inches from Sudbury on the map. But you know what? My dad said, "This is the best thing for you. You're going up there to play hockey and go to school. You don't have any distractions as far as, coming back home to Thorold and seeing your buddies. You just focus on hockey and school." And that's certainly what I did. And I love Sault Ste. Marie. It's obviously been my home since 1990. My wife obviously is from here and her family. So uh, as I look out the window now, I don't like the white stuff on the ground, but certainly it is home now. And I do still have my heart's still in Thorold, but Sault Ste. Marie has certainly been a big part of our family.
That's something that fascinates me because as a kid, we had a cottage up in Perry. Well, friends of mine had a cottage in Perry Sound, and sometimes we would go from Perry Sound to Sudbury, which you already referenced. And to me, that was Northern Ontario
Yeah.
until I got a little bit older, got involved in this league, and realized, oh, no, I worked in Thunder Bay for a bit. So even Sault Ste. Marie,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
not north anymore. However, the older I get, the more appeal that it has for me as a destination for a lot of reasons that obviously you've come to love yourself. I mean, you've settled in Sault Ste. Marie. What makes it an attractive place today?
Well, I'll tell you right now, if any of your listeners have never been up here in the summertime, it's unbelievable. The opportunities as far as outdoors and fishing and wildlife is it really is truly is one of the best spots in Ontario. And both my boys are big into fishing, and there's so many different lakes up here, and a lot of our friends of ours have, we call them camps, but years ago I used to call them cottages.
You learn, absolutely. I understand.
But there's you know um just being on the water, there's a certain feel that is a that attracts a lot of people. And there's so many great places as far as tourism up here, and it's a shame because a lot of people just think it's too far to go. But once you're here, it's a place that you'll certainly want to visit again.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it occurs to me as we agree on this, I think we just helped a little bit anyway, that Memorial Cup bid for 2024.
We'll have to wait and see. I don't know. It's interesting. You see the three teams that are involved: Kingston, Niagara, and the Sioux, and you look at their lineups, Mike. And I don't know. They're going to have to do a whole lot of movement and trading, and I don't know if it's feasible for any of the three to be able to compete in that big of a turnaround. But we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, the Memorial Cup that was hosted here my last year, the venue was phenomenal. It was packed. The town was buzzing, and to this day, people still talk about that and what a high it was for Sault Ste. Marie.
How do you feel about the new barn? I mean, I know you're going to the same place because they
Yeah.
basically just built it on the same site, but how do you feel about the new Memorial Gardens versus the old?
You know what? I just feel there's not a whole lot of atmosphere in the building. It's a beautiful building, and I find that with a lot of the new buildings, there's just not that character and not that feeling that you want. Like I walk into Peterborough Arena, and there's that. It's almost like a smell or a feel that brings you back in time. And North Bay is the same. North Bay was one of my favorite rinks when I played in the Ontario Hockey League because it just had character and something about it. But yeah, for some reason, I don't know, maybe in time it'll grow on me. But it's a nice venue, but it's certainly missing, in my opinion, something as far as the atmosphere.
I sometimes do these little walking video tours of other arenas that I'm in when I have the time to do them. And when I've done the one in Sault Ste. Marie before and I stop at that painting on the wall of the 93 championship team, lots of times I get comments from people that were a part of it. Oh, I'm in that picture. Do you ever stop by it and
Yeah,
reminisce?
yeah, oh yeah. Actually, we had a field trip. So I'm elementary teacher here in Sault Ste. Marie. I teach grade 7, and we had a field trip the one day, and we ended up in the building, and one of the kids had noticed. One of their fathers had said, "Oh, Mr. Mateer's in this picture," and they took a picture, and then they showed me. So the cat was kind of out of the bag. I looked obviously a lot younger and a little tinier, but it was quite comical because they didn't really put that connection together. It's parents at home saying, "Yeah, your teacher used to play hockey for the Greyhounds," but they don't really they can't put two and two together sometimes. So it's quite comical.
I got to think though, Mark, that's some pretty serious street cred for a grade 7 teacher now, eh?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I'm part of Hockey Canada. We have a hockey academy that we started here 5 years ago. So I still get on the ice twice a week with my grade 7s and 8s. So they actually get to see me out on the blades, but I'm not performing too many different moves because these kids have so much skill. So it's we have a really good time and a lot of laughs.
You mentioned a couple of arenas, and I agree, by the way, on both North Bay and Peterborough. We were just up in the Bay a couple of weeks ago with the Rangers, but both of those teams factored into a couple of the runs that the Greyhounds made. Let's focus first on North Bay, that 92 team that you said was probably the best one that lost that heartbreaker in the Memorial Cup final. But you were, if I'm not mistaken, that season, you were down 3-2 to North Bay and had to go win in their barn to
Yeah.
force a game 7.
Yes, actually, you are correct because we had Chris Simon was suspended again. And we had a couple injuries. Guys, it was, last minute decision if they were going to play or not. So we were going down there with the mentality, okay, we don't have Cy. We might have a couple guys out in the lineup. This is an uphill battle here. We went into the barn. We won 2-1. The only reason I know that is because I scored in the game, and my parents had drove up the 5 hours from Thorold, and I had a lot of my girlfriend and friends here had drove from Sault Ste. Marie, so I had a lot of fans in the building. And I, like I said earlier, I always loved playing in that building. It was nice and bright. Um, and there was just that feel. But yeah, myself and Dave Matzo scored, and Kevin Hodson might have played the best I've ever seen him play in that one particular game. He stole the show, and we got to bring it back here to Sault Ste. Marie, and the rest is history. But North Bay had a great team. It was a great series. It was just back and forth. But it was, yeah, those certainly were good times here in Sault Ste. Marie.
I know we already talked about Sault Ste. Marie and how far north it is until you kind of get used to it. But I hope everybody noticed that you just said we went down there to North Bay, because
Yeah.
we always talk about going up, Mark. We're always going
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, everything from the Sioux is downhill, I think. So, yeah, and you know what? I forgot to mention Kitchener. Kitchener was another rink that I enjoyed playing, and I know obviously your ties to Kitchener, but it was always a great rink because I always had a lot of family come and see me there, and obviously Niagara Falls, the little shoebox that we used to play in, was always packed with a lot of students from Thorold High that I went to, and a lot of family members. So a lot of great barns in the OHL.
You've mentioned the names already: Chris Simon, Tony Yob on that 91-92 team.
Yeah.
Did you, I mean, when I look at that roster and I see both of those names on it, I know Simon came partway through in a trade, but you almost have played 6-7 inches taller with those two guys in your lineup.
Oh yeah, Chris. To this day, I don't think I've ever played with a guy as tough as Chris Simon. Brian Gowdy was pound for pound pretty close to Cy, but once Cy turned that switch on, it was like, get out of my way. Um, yeah, it's not going to end well. Funny story. When we traded for Chris Simon, the first it was the second practice we were doing a one-on-one, and he came down on me, and I poke checked him, and he slashed me in the shin pad. So I slashed him back. He dropped his gloves and came at me, and I actually, luckily, I popped him with one, and then he hit me with about 18 or 19, and a bunch of the guys had to break it up. And ended up, he called me that night and he apologized, and from that day on, we were really good friends when we were together here in Sault Ste. Marie. But the next day I could barely get my helmet on because I had a couple goose eggs on the top of my head. But yeah, those are some stories that I've told to the kids, and they laugh.
The fact that you popped Chris Simon at all speaks to you. Maybe, did you have that in your toolbox back then, Mark?
Yeah, you know what? I didn't do a lot of it, but I'd like to think I was a technical fighter if I ever had to drop the gloves. And I ended up one night in Detroit. Ralph Inchernuva was going up the middle, and Darren Hurley. I don't know if you remember Darren Hurley. Darren was a tough guy for Detroit that could play the game as well. We ended up playing together over in England afterwards, but sure enough, he pops Ralphie in the neutral zone, and I'm the closest one there, so I have to drop my gloves. So we go at it, and I ended up tying him up both elbows, and he couldn't get loose, so he headbutted me. Broke my nose, and then yeah, years later overseas, we become best buddies, and actually I just talked to him the other day. But yeah, so it's funny how the hockey world works. But with Chris Simon, none of us really had to worry, and Brian Gowdy, you know, you never really, you could just be comfortable out there and just play your game. And I think that's one of the reasons why Teddy used to go out every year and try and get the toughest guy in Canada, so that guys like Jarrett Reed and Steve Sullivan and Ralph Inchernuvo could do their thing.
When you talk about Hurley as a guy that was tough but could play, it kind of brings me back, and we talk about this with lots of guys from roughly your era and before, and just to get your perspective on it then versus now. We know how much different the game is, but like, Tony Yob, I'm pretty sure he led the Memorial Cup tournament in scoring the one year, or at least the playoffs for you guys. So he could do it both ways. Cy was no slouch when it came to, picking up points here and there. And you mentioned Hurley as well. That kind of player's role, I don't know that it even really exists in the game today. How do you view the two eras?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right. It's hard to find that mix anymore, just because of the whole mentality that basically there's not a whole lot of fighting anymore. But I'm still a fan of a rugged big winger. I think you need that in the playoffs. I think one of the reasons why the Greyhounds haven't had success as far as going to the Memorial Cup or getting out of the OHL is I just think they're too small for the playoffs. I think they have a lot of players that are basically cookie cutter, and they're the same. They're 5'8". They're really skilled and they look great in warm up, but when that anthem finishes, and you've got you know 6'4" winger coming down on you, you better be ready, because the playoffs are a different beast. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Greyhounds have fallen short, is they just haven't had the makeup. I think you need to have a balance of size, and I think it starts with a couple big wingers, and maybe a big centerman. And you look at Peterborough; they've always got big defensemen, and they've got that rink where I think you can get away with maybe some defensemen that maybe aren't as mobile. Just the way that rink's set up with the square boards or the square corners, but they always seem to have big defensemen, and I think there's still a need for a big physical defenseman now. Whether that means going out and fighting, I think we could debate that all night. But I still think there's a time and a place for a big forward or defenseman to go out and send a message. But you mentioned Cy and Tony Yob; those guys. I don't think the fans realize how good they were offensively. I don't think they got the credit that they deserved, because they were so good at the other aspect of the game. So it's funny. It kind of takes away. Simon was such a tough guy. It kind of took away some of the reputation of his offensive skills. And I had the pleasure of going to two Quebec Nordiques camps with Chris Simon, and he was the one camp. He was one of the leading scorers in Quebec, and that's at the NHL level. You got Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic, Owen Nolan. Like, there was some high end talent, and Cy was right there with them. So it's funny, we remember him for his toughness, but he certainly was underrated as far as offensively.
It's funny. I thought of those exact names when you mentioned going to a Nordiques camp. So tell me, Mark Mateer, what it's like being at a camp with Forsberg and Sakic and Nolan out there.
Yeah, well, I grew up with Owen, Nolan, and Thorold, so I knew Owen, so there was a little bit of comfort there. My first training camp was in Washington, so I was drafted to Washington, then traded the year after to Quebec. But my first training camp, we were joking, Gino and I, on air the other night. Well, Dale Hunter was at my first training camp, so there was Dale Hunter, Kevin Hatcher, Al Iafredi, Craig Ludwig. So there were some names there, but the Quebec camp was it was at a whole nother level. It was like Joe Sakic. You look around the room, you got Joe Sakic, and Peter Forsberg at the time was just breaking in, and he was probably, yeah, he probably will be one of the best players I've ever skated on the same ice with him and Sakic. But it was it was an experience. I had a great 2 years in Quebec, and then obviously with the farm team in Cornwall, we had some good teams and some good players that came through there as well. It was a great organization at that time.
I was also thinking, as you talked about Peterborough and the square corners and the kind of rink that you can, that's why they tend to have these big defensemen. And it made me think of another team in the East. And I know you wouldn't have gone to the arena a lot from the Sioux, but in Belleville, you can't get away with that sort of thing with that wider surface. Those D had to skate.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a lot of players that loved playing in Belleville for that reason. You got Jarrett Reed at the time, was probably one of the fastest skaters, and Ralphie. and Steve Sullivan were three of our four, and Aaron Gavey was no slouch as far as foot speed as well. So we had a fast team, and we were almost built for a rink like that. um, it would have been nice to play in that rink a little more, but I always enjoyed my time going to the east. You know, you go to the obviously Cornwall my first year, and then you swing by Kingston, and I love playing in Ottawa as well. So it was always nice to see the other teams from the east.
So that 91 run that we talked about and the chance to play against Oshawa and Eric, and you get that little bit of homesickness because the team just kept on winning. You win the OHL final that next year, all the way to the Memorial Cup final, and the heartbreaker with 14.6 seconds to go. At the end of that one, Mark, did you think, my God, like, was it even conceivable that you could return and do it again?
Yeah, you know what? At the time, the obvious disappointment. You look around the room, and I said it earlier, guys that you know it was their last chance, and you just feel bad for them. But then it quickly changed to, and I give credit to Killer Kowalski. Um, I remember having a conversation with him and Dave Matsos, Drew Bannister, and all of us that were, you know, older guys on that team, and I remember thinking like, we could conceivably come back with a team we have returning. We could make another run, and it was to some it might seem not real or not anything that you could achieve, but at the time we did believe that we still had a good core, and we had potentially the goaltending with Hodson coming back. So at the obviously at the time there was disappointment, but it quickly, like I said, it quickly shifted to some optimism, and you know, uh, Teddy Nolan coming in and Sherry Basson and Danny Flynn, they're relaying the message as well. Boys, this isn't over. We've got some unfinished business to do, and we certainly did that the next year.
So what's that year like then? If you have it in your mind that, hey, we could, maybe even we should be back. I mean, it almost would, again, I'm just saying this as an outsider, but it would almost make the regular season seem like more of a grind because you just want to get to the good stuff at the other end of it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? It was almost, we had the mentality of, we obviously thought we could win every game that we, if we showed up and we played our game, we had a chance of winning every single game. Now, did we do that? No. We did go through our ups and downs, but we knew we had that core. And I talked about leadership earlier. Killer Kowalski was the best captain that I've ever had. He just knew how to motivate. He knew when to take guys aside. He led by example, and he went through that first year where they didn't win a lot of games, and then we go to Quebec, and then we go to Seattle. So these rookies that are coming in are looking around the room and looking at all of us, and we've been to two Memorial Cups, and they're thinking, okay, we better do what they say because obviously they know what they're saying. So it was easy that way in order to get guys to buy in, and no egos. I look back at that team, and we were so close knit that there was no egos. There was no first rounders to the NHL, making big bucks. We were all really striving to get that goal, and that was the Memorial Cup. And I think that's one of the reasons why we won, is because we were so close and we went through so much the year before in Seattle and the disappointment, and it was always in the back of our minds to get back to that place. And like I said, we certainly did it against Peterborough.
Well, and that's what I was just going to talk about because we were talking about the Petes earlier. They factored into that 93 run for you guys in a big way. You sweep them in round one for the right to host, then they come back and beat you in the OHL final, and in the Memorial Cup, you get the better of them. But that Pete's team that year was no slouch at all. I think they were the highest scoring team in the league.
Yeah, you know what? They had a really good team. We were pretty evenly matched as far as speed and goal scoring. um, and defense. Where we, I think, took the upper hand was in our the goaltending, and I think they had Chad Lang, and I think if you were talking to Chad Lang, I don't know, he might not say it, but I think if you talk to everyone that was involved in that team, they probably thought Kevin Hodson was superior at the time to Chad Lang, and that's no, I hate to say that, but I find that's my opinion, and I think that was one of the areas that we actually outmatched them was in goal. But other than that, two really good coaches going at it, Dick Todd and Teddy Nolan. So it was a matter of executing. And like you say, the Super Series was unbelievable to host, and then they win the league, and then obviously we had their number. But you look at their lineup; they had Mike Harding, Jason Daw, Dave Roach was their top line, and that was a tough line to play against. Bannister and I seem to get that matchup all the time, so they were tough to play against. Then you got Dale McTavish on the second line, Ryan Black, and who else was it? They had like I say, Jordy Kinnear was on the back end, obviously Pronger and Tully. So it was two really balanced teams going at it, but I would give the Greyhounds a little edge in the goaltending department.
So from the 14.6 seconds of disappointment the year prior, what do you remember as the clock ticks down in your barn, in your city, as you're about to clinch and win the Memorial Cup?
Oh man. I remember being out there the last it seemed like 2 minutes, but I wanted to go off, but I didn't want to go off because I wanted to be on the ice with obviously Bannister, and Rick Kowalski was out there, and Teddy had strategically kind of tried to put out guys that had been through it all. So I remember Chris Pronger was out there. Um, I remember just skating around and just seeing a sea of red in the crowd and everyone going nuts. You couldn't really hear anything. It was just one loud sound of just cheering and people going crazy. But it was just chaos when that final buzzer went off. Obviously, we're skating around and you're jumping on Hodson, and guys are trying to get to their families, and it was just it was a special moment for sure, not only for the players but the families that had been there the 3 years. I don't think they get enough credit as well. They went through it all. They went through, Quebec where we didn't win a game and the disappointment. They went through the Seattle with 14.6 seconds. And I'm sure they came up to Sault Ste. Marie thinking, wow, I really hope they win this one. But I remember driving to the rink before the game against the Petes and just thinking there was just I just felt really calm and confident. I just thought to myself, there's no way we're losing this. Like, no way the hockey gods can be this cruel. And there we had a solid game, and sure enough, the hockey gods were smiling down on Sault Ste. Marie.
I know, Mark, that it takes an awful lot, the 20 guys on the ice and everybody else involved in the organization. But I can't help but wonder if the Hounds have the run that they have in the 3 years that you're there without Ted Nolan as the head coach.
No, you know what, the obviously the talent and skill is there. It's still, you still need to be motivated at times throughout the year, and you still need to be held accountable, and you still need to have a room that gets along. And I think Teddy had a really strong hold on the room. He was that was his strong suit. He really knew how to motivate. Um, he really knew how to get the best out of every single person. And Danny Flynn doesn't get enough credit. Danny Flynn, to me, is probably the smartest hockey mind that I've ever come across. He was before his time. He was doing things way before anyone else in the OHL. And without him, honestly, without Danny Flynn, we do not win the Memorial Cup. We were so well prepared against teams in the West, teams in Quebec. Like he didn't have a chance to scout these teams. He obviously broke down video and took the time to know their tendencies and their strengths and their weaknesses. And to be honest, I don't think we win without the great hockey mind of Danny Flynn and the motivation, obviously, of Ted Nolan, who is both of them are just phenomenal people.
That's funny. I was going to say Danny Flynn's no slouch either. And
Yeah.
what high praise. You talk about him doing things that nobody else was doing at the time. Is it the use of video, the pre-scouting, those things that he was doing?
Yeah, it was the pre-scout. I remember we'd sit down every if we had a pregame skate, we'd have a meeting, quick meeting after, and we'd all get a stapled little booklet. It'd have the other team's lineup. It'd have all of their tendencies, their power play, their penalty kill, what they do, what we need to do, how do we counter that. It was honestly looking back, it was, I don't know how many hours. I don't think he got much sleep because the preparation that went into this was unbelievable. And it just he did it. He's still doing it. He's scouting for Columbus. He just loves the game of hockey. And what a great guy and great hockey player, Danny Flynn. And I'll tell you right now, a guy that can tell stories is Danny Flynn.
Okay, making a note. We'll
Yeah.
reach out to Danny at some point here for sure. You know, another guy that clearly loves the game and has been one of my favorite characters around the game for as long as I've been involved is, of course, the GM at the time up there in the Sioux and Sherry Basson. How involved was he, if at all?
He was involved. He would, he likes to hear himself talk. So he would he would waddle into the room. Sherry's hips are pretty much gone, so he'd come into the room and with his voice, and he'd get the boys going. And it was comical always to see Bass, whether it be on the road or here in Sault Ste. Marie. He actually got up to the Sioux quite a bit. Um, so it was always nice to see him. But yeah, he liked to be involved. But it was an ongoing joke. When he left the room, there was a couple Snickers, obviously, and guys would be telling stories. So he was a big part of it. He again, he's a great hockey mind, and he really knew his players that he brought in. And obviously with Chad Penny and Wade Gibson coming in at the trade deadline, they were huge factors in us winning the Memorial Cup. So without Sherry Basson, obviously that doesn't go down. So he certainly knows his hockey, and we all loved Bass for sure.
Yeah, he's hard not to like, and that
Yeah.
waddle is the perfect way to put it, given the hip issues. And I remember it from his time in Erie with the Otters, and he'd come to the rink with his dog, and they'd just be walking around
Oh
underneath
yeah.
before the game as we're all getting ready. There they were. Bass had to have his hellos.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where do
Uh,
you keep all the championship rings?
I have my rings in a box, just I believe in my bedroom closet, but I don't get them out very often. Every once in a while, somebody will want to see them, but I don't wear them or um, have them out too much. But there's certainly something that I'm very proud of, and it's certainly a big part of me.
Something that I'm always curious about, and we alluded to it with, kid from Thorold up to a point on the map that you had to unfold the entire map to see. And I recognize this every time we do any trip north from Kitchener, like North Bay, Sudbury, I mentioned a few weeks ago. Those are long trips for
Yeah.
us. Every trip's a long trip for a Sault Ste. Marie Greyhound. What is that travel like on a young hockey player?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at it. I think it really helped us become a team. We didn't know any other. Like this is something that um, we come to be accustomed to and really embraced it. We used to love going out on the road and head down to Kitchener and London and Windsor for the swing, and it was just a time to be on the road. And you always hear the term bunch of brothers together, and that's what it really was. We became so close because of a lot of those long bus rides, and you know win or lose, you get to do a lot of thinking at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring out uh, at on I-75. Whether you're -4 in that game or +4, it didn't matter. You still analyzed the game and you thought of what maybe you could have done differently, or things that you could have changed. But I think those long bus rides really made us become a really close-knit team.
Speaking of old buildings with character, how about that old barn in Windsor?
Oh yeah, we used to. Well, I remember pregame skates. He used to shoot pucks at the rats that used to used to run in the stands. Yeah, true story. We actually one year there was a squirrel that fell on the ice. I don't know if it was during a pregame skate or an actual game, but yeah, there was a squirrel that was trying to get across and yeah, fell on the Windsor. Now that was a tough barn to play in. The fans were right on top of you. They always had a pretty tough team, and they always had some skill. They obviously with Todd Warner and Stillman there before he got traded, and Billy Bowler. They always had, 2 or 3 guys that could really steal a game from you if you weren't watching them closely. So we had some battles for sure down there.
What do you recall, Mark, as the toughest place to play on the road?
The toughest place to play, I would say, I remember, well, my first year, London, the London Gardens was not a pleasant place to play. I always found it really dark. And they had obviously Barry Potomsky, Louis DeBrusque.
Oh,
they
yeah.
had some they had some big boys. So it was that was a little intimidating to go into London, but like we said earlier, like I had Bob Bugner as a defense partner, so I didn't have to worry about fighting. It was, Boogie was there to step in, or if anything happened, we always had a tough guy. And obviously, my second year was Chris Simon, and not too many guys would want to dance with Cy. But one of the rinks that I didn't really enjoy playing in was Owen Sound. Um, Again, just because the lighting. I used to have a bright arena, but Owen Sound's always dark and dingy. But they never really had too many guys that you had to worry about as far as toughness. But they had some gamers, but no real heavyweights. So yeah, Teddy did a really good job of always finding somebody in Canada that was willing to fight for the 19 other guys.
How did you enjoy the experience overseas?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, it was. You know what it was? It was basically junior hockey, but fast forward 5 years. There was a lot of guys. Shane McCosh, Dale Junkin, Kale Short, myself. We all played in Sheffield my first year. So we had a lot of fun, a lot of great stories. Obviously, Dale Craigwell ended up coming over. Denny VL came over in Sheffield. And then after my first year in Sheffield, I moved to Bracknell Bees, which was in southern England, and I was there for 3 years, and I enjoyed my time there. And that's when Darren Hurley and myself and Brad Peddle, Blair Scott at year 2, I believe he came in. So there was a lot of familiar names, and like I say, it was basically the OHL, but we were older and drinking more beer and getting paid.
Well, and it's not a bad part of the world to spend your time in outside of the rink.
Yeah, you know what? We got to see a lot of different places over there. Obviously, Wales and Scotland, and Belfast had a team, and yeah, so it was great that way. My wife Stacy obviously was over there. Actually, my oldest boy Tanner was born over there my second year. So I've always told him, he's 22. I said we'll get there back. We'll get back there one day.
You still got time, Mark. You still got
Yeah,
time.
we got lots of time. But no, I loved it. I obviously there's pros and cons, right? I love the hockey. I love the guys. I love the travel, but obviously the weather um, kind of gets to you after a while. But no, it was a great experience, and like I said, we look back on those times and we have a lot of laughs. So it couldn't have been that bad.
Was there ever any choice for Tanner and Jack that they'd end up putting on a pair of skates?
You know what? I obviously, as a father playing the game, obviously you want um, your kids to be happy, and you deep down you'd like them to play hockey. But I had no problems. They both obviously I build the rink in the backyard, and they both had a blast with that. So right from the get go, they loved skating, and they loved playing the game. So it was a win win for me.
A backyard rink in Sault Ste. Marie has got to be like October to May or something, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I spent a lot of nights out there
Or
staring at the moon with the hose or barrels going. So it was obviously well worth it. They, like I say, they loved it, and it was always a family affair back there. So we had a lot of good games out there.
our my good friends growing up, their dad took care of a rink for us too. He would do shift work, so when he would get home at 11, he'd be out flooding until 2 in the morning. I'm going to be honest, and I think my buddies would admit this too. He didn't care so much for how even everything was. He was just getting the water out there to make ice. How fussy were you about the way the backyard rink was
Yeah, you
constructed?
know what? I'm probably not as fussy as some of the fathers nowadays that are buying tarps, and I was pretty basic. I put up 16 feet of boards at each end. I didn't have any sideboards. I just do the snow banks, and then I've got a pretty level backyard, so it wasn't that difficult. I had basically one low spot, but once I got the garbage cans full and dumped them, it was pretty easy to see where obviously the water needed to go. But um, yeah, so a lot of nights out there. For
We had a
sure.
we had a tree in the one corner, and it became like an extra defenseman.
Oh
You could
yeah,
use it to get around guys if you could make the corner. It was kind of
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
How do you like doing the broadcasting side of things?
I like it. You know, it's Gino and I get along great, and Jim Fitzpatrick and the other the crew that I work with are super people. So I like it. It gets me out of the house. Obviously, with Jack playing, um, I'm missing a little bit. I usually get home and I'll watch his game. I'll replay his game, but I'm getting a lot of updates from my son Tanner or my wife Stacy during the games. But so in a sense, that way it's a bit of a challenge. But no, overall, I've enjoyed doing it. So it's just a way for me to stay involved.
You had to go and say nice things about Gino. I was going to say, except for working with Cavallo. Come on, Mark.
He's awesome.
He is. He's a great guy.
He's a great guy. We go in a golf tournament every summer. He invites me into a golf tournament, so we have some laughs on the golf course in the summertime. But we have a lot of laughs off air. I honestly wish people could hear what we say off the air as opposed to on the air. It'd be a little more entertaining.
I suppose. It's a fun league to still be around, and I mean, it sounds like still having it as part of your life, like the game in some capacity, remains an important part.
Yeah, you know what? It's a big part of our life. We look forward to Jack playing, you know, when he's in Ottawa and we can't get there. Obviously, it's a night for us to just, sit back and watch on the TV and cheer on the 67s. But it's been a big part of the Mateers for a long, long time, and I really do hope it continues to be that way because, like I say, it's been without hockey. I don't know where I would be or what I would have because hockey has given me everything.
That just made me think, Jack in Ottawa, you and the family in Sault Ste. Marie, it's not altogether different than Thorold to Sault Ste. Marie. Could you
Yeah,
have picked a further place to go? Maybe
yeah,
Windsor.
yeah. You know what? It's just the way it worked out. You know what? It worked out. A lot of people are, there's been a lot of talk in Sault Ste. Marie why'd they pass on Jack? Why didn't they draft him? And I have it wasn't my decision. I honestly, I'm super happy. I didn't deep down, I didn't really want him to go to the Greyhounds because I wanted him to move away and get the overall experience of junior hockey. And Ottawa 67's organization is run like a pro team. He's got great off ice conditioning with Sean Young. His schooling with the Blythe Academy, now he's taking courses at university, has been fantastic. And the coaching that he's had, Andre Chernier, his first year, Bear was awesome with him, very patient. James Boyd's been great with him as well. So, and then now with Dave Cameron the last 2 years, there's certainly no complaints from us, and it's a pleasure when we actually get down to Ottawa because I have an older brother and his family that live there. Jack lives with a billet family, but so it's nice to see my older brother when we get there and we get to see a couple games. So it's been a big part of the Mateer family for sure.
I got to say, this has been one of the smoothest conversations I think we've ever had on this podcast. Thoroughly enjoyed all of it and all of the stories. Mark, thanks so much for making time to be a part of it. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Mike, and I hope to see you up in the Sioux here soon, eh?
We'll be there beginning of January. I can't wait.
Oh, it's a great time of year up here in January. it's a dry cold. It's a different cold up here.
Exactly.
No, it'll still be minus 30.
I remember that's, the one thing when we were talking before about how much we both enjoy it, certainly in the nicer, the warmer weather seasons. I'm so grateful, and I have been on a number of occasions, for that hotel being so close to the rink, because and the station mall in between, because it can give you a break when it's really cold. And there have been days where I'm like, I'm not staying outside the whole walk over there.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate this. Honestly, anytime, like I said, maybe reach out to Danny Flynn because he'd blow your mind with some of his stories for sure.
Consider it done. And thanks again for this. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, Mike, you take care.